I used to think breaking meant God had left the room. Like something in me had failed. Like I was too sensitive, too attached, too hopeful. I remember sitting alone after the separation, phone face down on the bed, pretending I wasn't waiting for it to light up. The room was quiet. Too quiet. That kind of quiet where you can hear your own breathing, and it almost hurts. And I kept asking myself, why did I have to fall apart like this? Why did God let me feel something so deep only to watch it break me? Why did the person who once felt like home suddenly feel unreachable? But what if the breaking was not the punishment? What if the breaking was the doorway? What if your spirit had to crack open first? So every false attachment, every karmic pull, every survival pattern, every version of love that kept draining you, could finally lose its power over your soul. God did not break your spirit to destroy you. He allowed the breaking because your magnetic alignment could not begin while you were still bonded to the wrong frequency. You were trying to hold together a life your soul had already outgrown. You were calling anxiety chemistry. You were calling inconsistency divine timing. You were calling emotional survival love. And God saw what you could not admit yet. That your heart was still magnetized to what wounded it. So the collapse came. The silence came. The separation came. Not because you were forgotten, but because something in you had to become honest enough to stop choosing pain just because it felt familiar. And if this message found you tonight, there may be a part of you that already knows. You are not breaking anymore. You are beginning to align. Part 1: the night you finally stopped pretending you were okay. I remember the first night I stopped pretending I was okay. It wasn't dramatic. There was no screaming. No final argument. No door slammed hard enough to make the neighbors look up. It was quieter than that. Almost worse. I was sitting on the edge of my bed with my phone face down, beside me like turning it over would. Somehow make me less attached to what I was waiting for. The room was dark except for the little strip of light coming through the curtains. My chest felt tight. My throat felt dry. My hands were cold in that strange way they get when your body knows something your mind is still trying to deny. And I kept telling myself, don't check. Don't look. Don't give them that much power. But every few minutes, my eyes went back to the phone anyway. Not because I wanted to. Almost like my nervous system had memorized the ritual. Wait. Check. Hope. Crash. Repeat. That is the part people don't talk about after separation. The body keeps waiting long after the mind understands. Your hand reaches for the phone before your pride can stop it. Your stomach drops before you even see the screen. A song plays in the background, and suddenly you are not in the room anymore. You're back in a memory. Back in their car. Back in that one conversation. Back in that moment where their eyes stayed on yours just a little too long. And something in you believed. This means something. That night, I wasn't crying at first. I was too tired to cry. That scared me. There is a kind of heartbreak where tears come easily. Then there is another kind, where your body becomes still. Too still. Like some part of you has gone offline. You sit there. You breathe. You hear the refrigerator humming in the other room. You hear a car pass outside. You hear your own thoughts getting louder and louder. And somewhere inside you, a small, exhausted voice finally says, I can't keep doing this. Not in anger. Not in confidence. More like surrender. A whisper from the deepest part of you. I can't keep pretending this doesn't hurt. Maybe you know that moment. Maybe you had yours in the shower, standing under water that had already gone cold. Maybe it happened in your car after work, before going inside, because you didn't want anyone to see your face. Maybe it happened at 2:17 in the morning, staring at a message thread you already knew by heart. Maybe it happened after you laughed with someone during the day. Then came home and felt the loneliness hit you so hard you had to sit down. That kind of breaking is not always visible. People can look completely normal while their spirit is collapsing. They can answer emails, make coffee, smile at the cashier, say, I'm fine with perfect timing, and still be carrying a quiet devastation inside their chest. Chosen ones know this kind of pain very well. The pain of holding yourself together for everyone else. while something in you is begging to fall apart honestly. And that word matters. Honestly. Because sometimes breaking is the first honest thing your spirit has done in a long time. Before the break, you were managing your emotions, managing their distance, managing your hope, managing the ache, managing the story you told yourself so you would not have to face what was really happening. You told yourself they were busy. You told yourself they needed space. You told yourself you were being patient. You told yourself the connection was just going through a test. But deep down, your body knew. Your body always knew. It knew when their replies started feeling colder. It knew when the warmth in their voice changed. It knew when the eye contact became shorter. It knew when the emotional room between you became too wide to ignore. And still, you tried to hold it together, because letting it break meant admitting something you were not ready to admit. That the thing you loved was no longer loving you back in a way that felt safe. That the connection you protected was quietly draining you. That the person you kept making excuses for may have been teaching you a lesson your soul had outgrown. And that realization hurts. Not just the loss, the humiliation of realizing how long you stayed. The shame of remembering the times you lowered your needs just to keep the connection calm. The ache of knowing you felt lonely even when they were still technically there. That is a very specific kind of heartbreak. When someone has not fully left, but your spirit already feels abandoned. You start becoming a smaller version of yourself. More careful. Less expressive. You rewrite texts before sending them. You wait before responding, so you do not seem too available. You act calm when your chest is burning. You say, "It's okay," when nothing inside you feels okay. And slowly, without noticing, you start negotiating with your own soul, just to keep access to someone who is no longer meeting you fully. I need you to hear this gently. Your spirit did not break because you were weak. It broke because it was tired of being used as a container for emotional survival. There is only so long you can carry uncertainty before your body starts asking for truth. Only so long you can call anxiety intuition. Only so long you can keep reaching for someone who keeps making you feel alone. At some point, the spirit refuses. Not loudly, not dramatically. It simply stops helping you pretend. That night, when I finally broke, I remember feeling something strange beneath the pain. A tiny thread of relief. I almost hated that feeling. How could I feel relief while losing someone I loved? How could part of me feel lighter while another part of me was shattered? That contradiction confused me for a long time. Now I understand it differently. Sometimes the breaking hurts the heart, but frees the spirit. The heart grieves what it wanted. The spirit releases what it could no longer survive. Both can be true. You can miss them, and still know they were draining you. You can love them, and still admit the connection was costing you peace. You can wish things had been different, and still feel God pulling your soul away from a frequency that kept wounding you. That is the emotional contradiction of awakening. It does not arrive clean. It does not arrive with perfect certainty. It arrives messy, with tears, with withdrawal, with memories that still hurt, with moments where you almost go back, with nights where you ask God, "Why did you let me feel this much?" And maybe the answer is not what we want in the beginning. Maybe God allowed you to feel it deeply so you could finally see what your spirit was attached to. Not to shame you, not to punish you, to reveal the bond, the wound, the pattern, the place where love had become survival. Because magnetic alignment cannot begin while your energy is still wrapped around the wrong field. Your soul cannot move toward what is sacred while your nervous system keeps mistaking instability for destiny. So the breaking comes first. Not because God enjoys watching you hurt. Not because your tears mean nothing. But because something in you had to stop cooperating with what was slowly taking you away from yourself. That is the part one wish someone had told me earlier. The night you fall apart might not be the night your life ends. It might be the night your soul stops lying. It might be the night your spirit finally says, "No more. No more shrinking. No more waiting for crumbs. No more calling confusion a test of faith. No more abandoning your own peace just to keep someone close. And at first, that no more feels like grief. It feels like withdrawal. It feels like silence so loud you can barely breathe inside it. But underneath all of that, something sacred is happening. Your energy is beginning to return. Piece by piece. Breath by breath. Tear by tear. The part of you that kept reaching outward starts turning inward. The part of you that kept asking, "Why didn't they choose me?" starts asking something deeper. Why did I stop choosing myself? That question is painful. But it is holy. Because the moment you ask it honestly, your magnetic alignment has already begun. Not visibly. Not in a way other people can understand yet. But inside. In the place where your spirit finally stops protecting the life that was breaking it. So if you are in that night right now, or if you still remember it like it happened yesterday, the phone face down, the quiet room, the tight chest, the silence after loving someone who no longer knew how to meet you, please listen closely. You did not break because you failed. You broke because the part of you that was surviving the wrong connection could not carry you into the right destiny. And once that part finally cracked, God had room to begin something deeper, something cleaner, something aligned. But first, you had to stop pretending you were okay. Lesson of this chapter. Sometimes your spirit breaks when it can no longer keep lying for the part of you that is exhausted. The breakdown was not proof that you were weak. It was the first honest moment after too much emotional survival. And once you stop pretending, you begin seeing what was never truly loving you back. Part 2: the connection that felt sacred but kept hurting you. There is an uncomfortable truth I had to admit after the separation. Some connections feel spiritual, not because they are meant to stay, but because they reach the wound so deeply that your soul cannot ignore it anymore. I did not want to believe that at first. I wanted the intensity to mean destiny. I wanted the ache to mean confirmation. I wanted the pull to mean God was showing me the one. It felt easier that way. Cleaner. More romantic. Less humiliating. Because if the connection was divine, then maybe all the anxiety had a purpose. Maybe the sleepless nights were part of the journey. Maybe the waiting was faith. Maybe the confusion was just divine timing moving slowly. I told myself all kinds of things to survive the emotional inconsistency. You know that feeling, don't you? When someone gives you just enough warmth to keep your heart attached, then disappears long enough to make your nervous system panic. When one message can calm your entire body, and one silence can make you question your worth. When their name lights up your phone, and suddenly your chest relaxes, like your body has been holding its breath for hours. That kind of connection is hard to explain to people who have never lived inside it. From the outside, they say simple things. Just move on. If they wanted you, they would show you. Stop giving them access. And sometimes they are right. But they do not understand the invisible part. They do not understand how a connection can feel sacred and unsafe at the same time. They do not understand how someone can look into your eyes once, with a depth that makes your whole body remember them, then act emotionally distant the next day. They do not understand how confusing it is when the energy feels undeniable, but the behavior feels inconsistent. That contradiction can break a person quietly. I remember one night staring at a message that only had 4 words in it. Nothing cruel. Nothing dramatic. Just short. Too short. And somehow my body knew. The tone was different. The warmth was missing. I read it once. Then again. Then again. As if staring at it long enough would bring back the version of them I had felt before. That is one of the most painful parts of attachment. You start searching for the person inside their crumbs. A period at the end of a sentence starts feeling like distance. A delayed reply becomes a story. A lack of emoji feels like emotional withdrawal. You begin studying silence like it is a language. And in a way, it is. The body hears what the heart does not want to accept. Your stomach tightens. Your breathing changes. Your hands get restless. You start checking your phone without deciding to. You open the conversation thread just to feel close to them for a few seconds. Then you hate yourself for doing it. Not loudly, quietly. That kind of shame sits deep. You think, why am I like this? Why do I care this much? Why can't I just detach like everyone else seems to? But you were not weak. You were bonded. There is a difference. And some bonds become powerful not because they are healthy, but because they activate the exact wound that still believes love must be earned. That is the part one had to face. The connection felt magnetic. Yes. But was it peaceful? Did it make me feel safe in my body? Did it help me become more honest with myself? Or did it turn me into someone who waited, analyzed, shrunk, and called it devotion? Raw honesty hurts here. I did not only miss the person, I missed the emotional high, the relief after the panic, the sudden warmth after the coldness, the way one affectionate message could make the whole week feel meaningful again. That cycle can feel like love when your nervous system has learned instability is home. It is not always romance. Sometimes it is withdrawal. Sometimes it is emotional addiction dressed in spiritual language. And I know that sounds harsh. I resisted that realization too. I wanted to believe every intense pull was sacred. I wanted to believe every ache was evidence. I wanted to believe the connection hurt because it mattered so much. But eventually, the body tells the truth. A connection can be powerful and still not be aligned. A person can awaken something in you and still not be able to meet you. A bond can feel spiritual and still keep you emotionally starving. Those things can exist together. That is what makes it so painful. If it had been empty, you would have left sooner. If they had never shown depth, you would not have wondered so much. If the connection had been obviously wrong, your spirit would not have wrestled with it for so long. But they did show something. They did touch something. They did make you feel seen in moments. And those moments became evidence your heart used against you. Every time you tried to walk away, your memory brought up the softness, the eye contact, the one conversation where they sounded vulnerable, the night they almost said what you needed them to say. Almost. That word can keep a soul trapped for years. Almost ready, almost consistent, almost honest, almost choosing you, almost healed, almost able to meet you. But almost is not alignment. Almost is a doorway that never fully opens. And maybe you stood at that doorway for too long. I did. I stood there with my hands full of hope, trying to convince myself the door was not closed, trying to make the silence mean something better than what it was showing me, trying to turn emotional inconsistency into a spiritual test. I called it patience. Some days it was fear. I called it faith. Some nights it was attachment. I called it love. A part of me was simply afraid that if I let go, I would lose the only connection that had ever made me feel that deeply. That is the kind of honesty that changes everything. Not the polished kind. The ugly kind. The kind you admit alone. The kind you whisper to yourself when nobody else can hear. I am not only holding on because I love them. I am holding on because I am scared there will never be another connection like this. There it is. The wound underneath the longing. The fear that the deepest thing you have felt is also the only thing you will ever feel. But God does not build sacred alignment on fear. Magnetic alignment does not begin while your soul is still negotiating with emotional instability. Something had to break the false pull. Something had to interrupt the cycle. Something had to make you tired enough to stop calling pain destiny. Not because the connection meant nothing. It meant something. It showed you where you were still vulnerable to being chosen halfway. It showed you where your nervous system confused relief with love. It showed you where your soul was still magnetized to people who could activate you, but not protect your peace. And that is a painful mirror. No one wants to see that. No one wants to admit. I stayed longer because chaos felt familiar. No one wants to admit. I kept waiting because I hoped their consistency would finally prove I was worth staying for. But the moment you admit it, something loosens. Not all at once. Not magically. But enough. Enough for your spirit to breathe. Enough for you to ask a different question. Not, why did they pull away? But, why did I keep reaching for someone who made me feel alone? That question is the beginning of alignment. It shifts the focus back to the place where your power lives. Inside you. In your patterns. In your choices. In your energy. In the part of you that is finally learning the difference between a sacred pull and a wounded pull. A sacred pull does not require you to abandon your peace to keep believing in it. A wounded pull keeps asking you to suffer so it can feel significant. Read that slowly. A wounded pull keeps asking you to suffer so it can feel significant. And maybe that is what God was trying to break. Not your heart. Not your hope. Not your capacity to love. The magnet inside you that kept being drawn back to what hurt. That magnet had to be purified before true magnetic alignment could begin. The false field had to lose its power. The anxiety had to stop feeling like chemistry. The inconsistency had to stop feeling mysterious. The silence had to stop feeling like a test you were meant to pass by waiting longer. And when that started happening, it felt like loss. Of course it did. You were not just losing a person. You were losing a whole emotional reality. A fantasy. A future. A version of love that your wounded self had built meaning around. But underneath that grief, something cleaner was forming. A new standard. A deeper discernment. A quieter strength. The kind that says, if it costs me my nervous system, it is not my peace. If it keeps making me question my worth, it is not my home. If I have to disappear to keep it alive, it is not sacred union. That realization does not come cheaply. It comes through tears, through humiliation, through tired mornings after restless nights, through the moment you finally stop checking your phone, not because you stopped caring, but because your spirit cannot survive another cycle. And that is where God begins the real work. Not in the excitement, in the exhaustion, not in the fantasy. In the moment you finally admit what the connection was doing to you. Your spirit had to break first. Because the false magnet had to break with it. And once it does, even softly, even painfully, you start feeling something unfamiliar. Not happiness yet. Not certainty. But space. A thin line of space between you and the attachment. A quiet breath. A small moment where you realize you can love someone and still release the version of yourself that kept bleeding for them. And that space is where magnetic alignment begins. Lesson of this chapter. Not every magnetic pull is sacred. Some pulls reveal where pain still feels familiar. The connection that hurt you may have awakened something real. But it also exposed where your nervous system was mistaking anxiety for love. And once that false pull begins to break, your soul finally has room to recognize what peace feels like. Part 3. God let it fall apart so you could stop denying what you felt. I remember feeling them leave before they actually left. That is the part that still stays with me. Not the ending itself. Not the final silence. Not even the moment I realized they were not coming back in the way I hoped. It was the way my body knew first. Before there was proof. Before there was a conversation. Before anyone said the words. Their voice sounded almost the same. But something underneath it had changed. The warmth was thinner. The pauses were different. The eye contact did not land the same way anymore. And I tried to tell myself I was imagining it. I tried to be reasonable. I tried to be calm. I told myself, maybe they're tired. Maybe they're stressed. Maybe I'm reading too much into this. But my chest knew. My stomach knew. My nervous system knew. There are some shifts you do not hear with your ears. You feel them in the body. A delay in response that feels heavier than it should. A message that looks normal but somehow feels empty. A conversation where the words are present, but the soul is missing. And when you are deeply connected to someone, you can feel the moment their energy begins pulling away. Even when they smile. Even when they say, everything is fine. Even when they act like nothing has changed. Your body still knows. That kind of knowing is painful. It makes you feel unstable. It makes you question yourself. It makes you wonder if your intuition is wisdom, or just fear wearing spiritual clothing. And honestly, that is one of the hardest parts of being emotionally sensitive. You can sense what others have not admitted yet. You can feel endings before they become visible. You can detect distance before it becomes silence. And sometimes, you wish you could not. Sometimes you wish you were less aware, less tuned in, less able to feel the emotional temperature of a room changing. Because knowing before there is proof puts you in a strange kind of loneliness. You are grieving something that technically has not ended yet. You are responding to a loss no one has confirmed. You are mourning a connection while still trying to act normal inside it. Have you ever been there? Sitting across from someone you love, watching them speak, nodding like you are listening, while another part of you is quietly whispering, "They're already gone." That moment can break something. Not loudly, not dramatically, but deeply, because you start splitting yourself in half. One part of you wants to trust the connection. The other part is already bracing for impact. One part wants to believe their words. The other part feels the absence beneath them. One part says, "Don't ruin this by overthinking." The other part says, "Stop ignoring what you feel." And that internal split is exhausting. You become your own emotional courtroom. You present evidence against yourself. You defend them. You accuse your intuition. You excuse their behavior. You minimize your discomfort. You tell yourself you are being too much, too sensitive, too wounded, too afraid. But there is a quiet cruelty in constantly denying what your body is trying to tell you. It teaches you to abandon your own knowing. And I think many of us did that for love, or what we thought was love. We learned to silence the inner alarm so we would not have to face the possibility of losing someone. We learned to call discomfort patience. We learned to call inconsistency a phase. We learned to call emotional distance space. And sometimes space is healthy. Sometimes people genuinely need room to breathe. But deep down, you know the difference. Healthy space does not make you feel like you are disappearing. Healthy space does not make your body panic. Healthy space does not leave you studying someone's tone like your worth depends on it. There is a difference between someone needing time and someone emotionally leaving while keeping you close enough not to feel guilty. That difference hurts to admit. I did not want to admit it either. I wanted the connection to be what I felt in the beginning. I wanted the first version of them to be the whole version. The attentive one. The warm one. The one whose eyes felt soft when they looked at me. The one who made me believe there was a future hidden somewhere between us. So when the energy changed, I kept reaching backward. Back to the first conversations. Back to the moments where everything felt easy. Back to the texts that made my whole body smile. Back to the memory of being chosen before I felt uncertain. That is what attachment does. It uses the beginning as evidence against the ending. It says, "But remember how they were? Remember what they said? Remember how real it felt?" And yes, it may have been real. But something can be real in a moment and still not be aligned for a lifetime. That sentence took me years to understand. I used to think real meant permanent. If I felt it deeply, I thought it must have been sent to stay. If the bond felt spiritual, I thought the pain had to be part of the path. If the connection shook me, I thought it had to be destiny. But some connections shake you because they are exposing what you still refuse to see. Some people enter your life like mirrors, not to become your home, but to show you where you have been homeless inside yourself. And God lets certain things fall apart when the mirror has done its work. Not gently always, not conveniently. Sometimes right when you still want more time. Right when you still think the story could be saved. Right when your heart is still bargaining. That is what makes it feel so cruel. You wanted closure. God gave exposure. You wanted reassurance. Life gave you evidence. You wanted the connection to return to what it was. But your spirit needed to see what it had become. And once you see it, you cannot fully unsee it. That is where the falling apart becomes sacred. Not beautiful. Not easy. Sacred. There is a difference. Sacred does not always mean soft. Sometimes sacred means the illusion finally breaks loudly enough for your soul to stop defending it. Sometimes sacred means the person becomes inconsistent enough that you can no longer romanticize the connection. Sometimes sacred means the silence becomes so painful that you finally hear yourself. I remember the moment I stopped trying to explain their distance. It was not because I stopped loving them. It was because I was tired. Tired in my bones. Tired in my chest. Tired of trying to make my intuition look irrational, just so I could keep hoping. And there was one evening. I remember this so clearly. I was standing in my kitchen, holding a glass of water I had forgotten to drink. The room was quiet. My phone was on the counter. No message. No explanation. No emotional rescue. And for the first time, instead of asking, "What are they feeling?" I asked, "What am I feeling?" That question felt small, but it changed something. I realized I had been so focused on decoding them, that I had stopped listening to myself. I had been asking whether they loved me, while ignoring the way the connection was making me feel unloved. I had been asking whether they were coming back, while ignoring the fact that I was already abandoning myself waiting for them. That is the moment the collapse begins to reveal its purpose. It pulls your attention away from the person, and puts it back on the wound. Not to shame you, to heal you. But healing does not always feel like healing at first. Sometimes it feels like losing the story you used to survive. The story that said, "They are just afraid. They will come around. This is a test. This pain means it is powerful." Sometimes those things may carry pieces of truth. But if a story keeps you emotionally starving, it is not feeding your soul. It is feeding your attachment. And God cannot begin magnetic alignment while attachment is still dressed like destiny. So the situation had to become honest. The inconsistency had to become visible. The emotional absence had to stop hiding behind potential. The silence had to reveal what your hope kept covering. That is why it fell apart. Not because you were not worth staying for. Not because you loved wrong. Not because God wanted to embarrass your heart. It fell apart because something in you was still trying to build a future on a feeling, while ignoring the foundation. And foundations matter. A connection can have chemistry and still lack safety. It can have spiritual intensity and still lack emotional maturity. It can have moments of depth and still lack consistency. And your spirit knew. Long before your mind accepted it. Long before your heart stopped fighting. Long before the final door closed. Your spirit knew. That is why your body reacted. That is why your sleep changed. That is why your appetite disappeared. That is why you felt anxious after conversations that were supposed to comfort you. Your body was not betraying you. It was telling the truth. The connection had become a place where your nervous system could not rest. And what is meant for your magnetic alignment cannot require your body to live in constant survival. Sacred love may challenge you. It may stretch you. It may awaken deeper layers of truth. But it will not consistently make you feel like you have to abandon yourself just to keep access. That is not alignment. That is emotional captivity with spiritual language around it. Raw honesty. I used to hate seeing it that way. It made me feel foolish. Like I should have known sooner. But now I have more compassion for that version of myself. She was not foolish. She was attached. She was hopeful. She was trying to make meaning out of pain because the alternative felt unbearable. And maybe you need that compassion too. For the version of you who stayed. For the version who waited. For the version who ignored the signs. For the version who kept defending someone who was already showing you they could not meet you fully. You were not stupid. You were trying to protect a dream. But dreams that require denial eventually become prisons. And God loved you enough to let the walls crack. That is what the falling apart did. It cracked the dream. It cracked the illusion. It cracked the part of you that kept saying, "I can handle this," when your spirit was whispering, "No, you cannot." And once the illusion cracked, light started entering through places you thought were only wounds. Slowly, painfully, quietly, you began seeing what you had been feeling all along. You began understanding the difference between emotional intensity and emotional safety. You began realizing that your intuition was not your enemy. It was the part of you God kept trying to speak through. And maybe that is why this chapter hurts so much. It is not just about losing someone. It is about admitting you felt the truth before you were ready to live by it. That admission is not easy. But it is the beginning of freedom. Because once you stop denying what you feel, you stop giving your power away to someone else's inconsistency. And something in your spirit begins to stand up. Not all at once. Not confidently. But enough. Enough to stop begging the illusion to become real again. Enough to ask what your soul has been trying to show you. Enough to begin the next stage. The silence after the break. And that silence is where the real initiation begins. Lesson of this chapter. Sometimes God lets something fall apart so you can stop denying what your spirit already felt. The collapse is not always punishment. Sometimes it is exposure. It makes visible what your heart kept explaining away. And once you finally see the truth, you cannot return to the same illusion with the same innocence. Part 4. The silence after the break was the real initiation. The silence after separation has a sound. I know that sounds strange, but anyone who has lived through it understands. It is not normal quiet. It is not peaceful quiet. It is the kind of silence that fills the room so completely you almost want to turn on anything. A fan, a podcast, an old show you are not even watching. Just so you do not have to hear your own heart trying to understand what happened. I remember the first few nights after the connection truly broke. Not the first argument, not the first distance. The real break. The moment where your body finally understands. They are not coming back the way I hoped. That silence was different. The phone did not light up. No explanation came. No apology. No sudden message saying, "I have been thinking about you." Just nothing. And somehow, nothing felt louder than anything they could have said. I remember putting my phone across the room like that would make me stronger. Then walking back to check it anyway. I remember waking up in the middle of the night with that strange pressure in my chest. The kind that makes you look around the room like something is missing. And something was missing. Their presence. Or maybe, the version of me that existed while waiting for their presence. That is the part one did not understand at first. The silence was not only about losing them. It was about losing the emotional rhythm my body had built around them. The checking. The hoping, the analyzing, the little surge of relief when they responded, the crash when they disappeared again. After the break, all of that stopped. And when the chaos stops, you expect peace. But peace does not come right away. At first, what comes is withdrawal, emotional withdrawal, spiritual withdrawal, nervous system withdrawal. Your body keeps reaching for the thing your soul knows it has to release. That is why separation can feel almost physical. Your hands feel restless. Your sleep becomes strange. You wake up too early. Or too late. You forget to eat. Then suddenly feel starving at midnight. You hear a song in a grocery store and your whole body freezes. You pass by a place connected to them and your stomach drops before your mind even forms the memory. The body remembers what the mind tries to manage. And in those first days, or weeks, the silence can feel cruel. You start asking questions that have no clean answer. Did they ever feel what I felt? Was I the only one affected this deeply? Were they able to just move on? Why am I still here emotionally stuck while they seem fine? Those questions can eat through a person quietly. You may not say them out loud. You may not tell anyone how much it still hurts. But alone, late at night, when the room gets still, those questions return. And sometimes the hardest question is the one you are embarrassed to admit. Why do I still want someone who made me feel this alone? That question hurts. Not because it is dramatic, because it is honest. And honesty after heartbreak feels like a second wound. The first wound is losing them. The second wound is seeing yourself clearly inside the attachment. Seeing how much you waited, how much you excused, How much you tried to stay calm when your spirit was panicking. How many times you felt lonely inside the connection before it even ended. I used to think the silence after separation was punishment. Like God had taken the person. Then taken every sign. Every answer. Every comfort. I remember praying one night and feeling almost angry. Not loud anger. A tired kind. The kind you whisper into a dark room. God, why are you quiet too? That was the part that scared me. When they went silent. I could survive that. But when heaven felt silent too, I felt abandoned in a way I did not know how to explain. Maybe you have felt that. You keep asking for clarity. You keep looking for signs. You keep hoping something will make the pain make sense. And for a while, nothing comes. No clear message. No miracle. No sudden emotional relief. Just the same quiet room. The same phone. The same ache. But later, much later, I began to wonder if the silence was not absence. Maybe it was space. Space I had never allowed myself to have. Space I kept filling with their energy. Their mood. Their timing. Their distance. Their inconsistency. Their potential. Their almost love. When someone becomes the center of your nervous system, silence feels like danger at first. Your body thinks connection is safety, even if the connection was hurting you. So when the connection disappears, your body panics. Not always because they were right for you. Sometimes because your system had adapted to surviving around them. That is a hard thing to admit. It is easier to say, I miss them. It is harder to say, my body became addicted to the emotional pattern. The waiting, the relief, the ache, the hope, the crash. That cycle becomes familiar. And familiar can feel like love when you have lived inside uncertainty long enough. So when silence arrives, it does not feel sacred. It feels empty. But underneath that emptiness, something begins. Something quiet. Something almost invisible. Your energy starts coming back. Not dramatically. Not like some perfect healing montage. It comes back in tiny, uneven ways. One morning you realize you did not check their profile first thing. One night you cry less than you expected. One afternoon you laugh at something small and feel guilty afterward. As if happiness means you are betraying the connection. Then another day. You sit alone, and the silence does not feel quite as violent. Still sad. Still tender. But less dangerous. That is how initiation begins. Not with certainty. With small moments where your spirit realizes it can exist without being pulled by them. I remember the first time I sat in silence and did not immediately reach for my phone. It lasted maybe 5 minutes. That was all. 5 minutes of not checking. 5 minutes of not searching for a sign. 5 minutes of not trying to feel them through a screen. It sounds small, but for someone in emotional withdrawal, 5 minutes can feel like crossing an ocean. In that silence, I noticed something strange. I was not peaceful yet. I was not healed, but I was present. For the first time in a long time, I could feel myself under the attachment. Not clearly, not fully, just enough to realize I was still there. That realization broke me in a different way, a softer way. I had spent so much time asking where they went, that I had not noticed where I went. Where did I go when I started waiting for them to choose me? Where did my confidence go? Where did my laughter go? Where did my natural softness go? Where did my voice go? Where did the part of me go that used to feel alive without needing someone's attention? Those questions do not arrive when your life is noisy. They arrive in silence. That is why silence is the real initiation. It does not simply remove the other person. It reveals what the attachment covered. The fear, the loneliness, the self-abandonment, the longing to be chosen, the old wound that whispered, if they come back, I will finally feel worthy again. That wound is painful to face. But facing it is where magnetic alignment begins. Not in the fantasy. Not in the chase. Not in the hope that someone else will finally regulate your nervous system. Alignment begins when your soul starts pulling its power back from the person, the outcome, the timing, the apology, the explanation, and returns it to you. That is why the silence had to come. You could not hear your own soul while constantly listening for their footsteps. You could not feel your own energy while tracking theirs. You could not recognize divine direction while trying to decode human inconsistency. The silence stripped away the noise. And yes, it hurt. It hurt more than you expected. There were moments where you probably wanted the old chaos back just to avoid the emptiness. At least chaos felt like movement. At least waiting felt like something was happening. At least longing gave your heart somewhere to point. Silence gives you nowhere to run. It sits you down with everything you avoided, and quietly asks, who are you without the thing you kept chasing? That question can feel brutal, but it is sacred, because your magnetic alignment cannot begin while you are still orbiting someone else's absence. Your destiny cannot activate while your energy is still waiting outside a closed door. Your spirit cannot rise while it is kneeling at the feet of a connection that keeps making you feel abandoned. So God allows the silence, not to torture you, to interrupt the addiction, to let the emotional fog clear, to let the body detox from unstable love, to let the soul remember its own sound. I know this part is not pretty. It is not the part people like to post about. There is no aesthetic way to describe crying into a pillow at 1:43 in the morning. No glamorous way to describe deleting a message you almost sent. No perfect spiritual language for the moment you whisper, I miss them, and then realize, you also miss yourself. That moment matters. The moment you miss yourself is often the moment healing becomes real. Because now the grief is no longer only about them. It becomes about the parts of you that got lost trying to keep them. And once you begin grieving those parts, you begin calling them home. Piece by piece. Breath by breath. Choice by choice. You stop checking. Then you check again. Then you forgive yourself. You sleep a little better. Then you have a hard night. Then you survive that too. You stop asking whether they will return, and begin asking whether you want to keep abandoning yourself if they do. That is not weakness. That is awakening. Messy awakening. Human awakening. The kind that happens in quiet rooms with tired eyes and a nervous system learning how to feel safe without the person it once craved. And slowly, the silence changes texture. It stops feeling only like absence. It starts feeling like space. Space to breathe. Space to remember. Space to hear the voice of God underneath the withdrawal. Not loud. Not dramatic. More like a quiet knowing rising from somewhere deep inside you. You are not being emptied for nothing. You are being returned to yourself. You are being prepared for a field that does not require your suffering to feel magnetic. And once you feel even a small piece of that, the next stage begins. Because when your energy starts coming back, you cannot avoid the question anymore. How much of yourself did you leave behind trying to be loved? Lesson of this chapter. The silence after heartbreak is not empty. It is where your nervous system begins detoxing from unstable love. It is where your soul starts returning to you after being wrapped around someone else's absence. At first, silence feels like punishment. Then slowly, it becomes the room where your spirit learns how to breathe again. Part 5, you started seeing where you had left yourself. I did not realize how much of myself I had left behind, until the silence gave me nowhere else to look. At first, I thought I was only grieving them. Their voice. Their presence. The way they used to say my name when things still felt soft between us. The little routines. The checking in. The inside jokes that stopped being funny once the connection broke. I thought the pain was only about missing someone. But later, in the quiet, I started noticing something more uncomfortable. I was not only missing them. I was missing the version of myself I had abandoned while trying to keep them. That realization did not arrive gently. It came in small, embarrassing moments, like rereading old messages and seeing how carefully I had softened myself. How many times I said, "It's okay," when it was not okay. How many times I typed what I actually felt, then deleted it. then sent something calmer, something safer, something easier for them to receive. I remember staring at one message I almost sent. It was honest, simple, not dramatic, just honest. I feel like I'm the only one trying to keep this alive. I typed it, read it, felt my heart pounding, then deleted it. I replaced it with, "No worries, I understand." And the moment I sent that softer version, something in me sank. Not loudly, just a small internal collapse. Like my spirit knew I had betrayed myself again. Have you ever done that? Changed the truth just enough to keep the peace? Acted calm while your nervous system was shaking? Smiled through a conversation while your chest was burning? Accepted less than you needed? Then called it patience? That is one of the hidden wounds of deep attachment. You do not always lose yourself dramatically. Sometimes you lose yourself politely. A little at a time. One unsaid sentence. One swallowed need. One excuse. One delayed boundary. One moment where you choose being easy to love over being honest. And at the time, it does not feel like self-abandonment. It feels like survival. It feels like maturity. It feels like compassion. You tell yourself, they're going through a lot. They don't mean to hurt me. I should be more understanding. I don't want to pressure them. And sometimes compassion is real. Sometimes people do need space. Sometimes love does require patience. But there is a line. A quiet line. And you feel it when you cross it. You feel it in your body. Your throat tightens. Your stomach twists. Your shoulders become tense. You send the message pretending to be okay. Then sit there feeling strangely hollow. Not because you did something wrong to them. Because you did something wrong to yourself. That is a hard sentence to admit. I did not want to admit it either. For a long time, I thought my pain proved how deeply I loved. I thought if I could just be patient enough, soft enough, spiritual enough, they would finally feel safe enough to meet me. So I kept adjusting. I became quieter, less demanding, less direct, less honest about what hurt. I started studying their moods before speaking my needs. If they seemed tired, I stayed silent. If they seemed distant, I became extra warm. If they pulled away, I gave them more room than I had to give. And every time I did that, I told myself I was being loving. Now I wonder how many times I was just afraid. Afraid that if I asked for consistency, they would leave. Afraid that if I named the pain, they would call me too much. Afraid that if I stopped being understanding, I would lose the connection completely. That fear is subtle. It does not always sound like panic. Sometimes it sounds like wisdom. Sometimes it wears the voice of spirituality. Give them grace. Trust the timing. Don't force anything. Let the connection unfold. Those can be beautiful truths. But when they are used to silence your own pain, they become cages. A spiritual cage is still a cage. And many chosen ones get trapped there. Not because they are foolish. Because they feel deeply. Because they see potential. Because they can sense the wounded child inside someone and confuse that awareness with a responsibility to stay. You can feel their pain, their fear, their avoidance, their unspoken tenderness. You can see the part of them that wants love but does not know how to hold it. And that makes leaving harder. You start thinking, they're not bad. They're just scared. They just need time. They have never been loved like this before. Maybe all of that is true. But here is the painful question. How long can you keep bleeding while waiting for someone else to become ready? How much of yourself are you allowed to lose in the name of understanding them? At what point does compassion for their wound become abandonment of your own? Those questions hurt. They hurt because they do not let you hide behind the fantasy anymore. They bring the focus back to you. Not to blame you. Not to shame you. To return you. I remember one morning after a night of barely sleeping. My eyes were swollen. My phone was beside me. No message. Again. I walked to the bathroom and looked at myself in the mirror. Really looked. Not the quick kind of look where you check your face and move on. I looked into my own eyes. and I barely recognized the exhaustion there. It startled me. I looked like someone who had been waiting outside a locked door for too long. And for a moment I whispered, "What happened to me?" Not dramatically. Just honestly. What happened to the person who used to laugh without checking if someone was distant? What happened to the person who used to speak freely? What happened to the part of me that did not need to earn basic emotional presence? That morning stayed with me. Not because I became instantly strong. I did not. I still missed them. I still wanted the message. I still hoped they would suddenly understand everything and come back with the words I had been waiting for. But something cracked open. A different kind of crack. I started seeing my own absence. I had been so focused on whether they were leaving that I had not noticed I had already left myself. That is what attachment can do. It can make someone else's emotional availability feel like the center of your existence. Their attention becomes weather. Their silence becomes winter. Their warmth becomes sunlight. Their distance becomes proof that something is wrong with you. And slowly, you stop asking what you feel. You start asking what they feel. You stop asking what you need. You start asking what will keep them close. You stop checking in with your spirit. You start monitoring their energy. That is not love anymore. That is emotional displacement. Your center moves outside of you. And once your center is outside of you, anyone can shake your world by simply becoming inconsistent. God cannot build magnetic alignment on that. Not because you are unworthy. Not because your love is wrong. But because sacred alignment requires you to come home to yourself first. Your energy cannot be magnetized to your destiny while it is still wrapped around someone else's uncertainty. So the breaking exposed the pattern. It showed you where you had made yourself smaller, where you had traded honesty for access, where you had confused being chosen with being safe, where you had mistaken emotional crumbs for spiritual signs. And I know, that realization can feel humiliating at first. You may look back and think, why did I accept that? Why did I keep waiting? Why did I keep giving more when I was receiving less? Please be careful with that shame. The version of you who stayed was not stupid. They were scared. They were hopeful. They were trying to protect a dream that felt sacred. They were loving from a place that had not yet learned how to feel safe without being chosen. There is grief in realizing that, but there is also tenderness. You can hold yourself differently now. You can say, I understand why I stayed, and I understand why I cannot keep staying in that version of myself. Both can be true. That is where healing becomes human. Not perfect, not cold, not instantly detached. Human. You can still miss them and begin choosing yourself. You can still feel the ache and stop feeding the cycle. You can still love someone and admit the connection taught you how deeply you needed to return to your own spirit. That return is not always glamorous. Sometimes it looks like not sending the message. Sometimes it looks like letting yourself cry instead of pretending you are evolved. Sometimes it looks like eating something small because your body needs care even when your heart feels shattered. Sometimes it looks like changing your sheets because the bed still feels like grief. Sometimes it looks like walking outside for 10 minutes with no music, just to remember that the world still exists beyond the connection. Tiny things, human things, sacred things. That is how you begin coming back. Not all at once. Piece by piece. You start telling the truth in small ways. I am hurt. I wanted more. I was not okay with that. I deserve consistency. I do not want to keep proving my worth to someone who makes me feel invisible. Those sentences may feel unfamiliar in your mouth at first, especially if you have spent years being the understanding one, the patient one, the one who feels everything but says very little. But every honest sentence brings energy back into your body. Every boundary returns a piece of your spirit. Every moment you stop performing emotional ease when you are actually in pain. Your magnetic field changes. Subtly, quietly, powerfully. You begin becoming less available for the kind of connection that requires your disappearance. And that shift matters. It matters more than the other person's apology, more than closure, more than whether they come back. Because the real question is no longer, will they choose me? The real question becomes, will I stop leaving myself to be chosen? That question is where magnetic alignment deepens. It cuts through the fantasy. It brings you back into your own center. It reminds you that sacred love cannot require you to become a ghost inside your own life. And maybe this is the part God needed you to see. Not just who they were, but who you became while trying to keep them. Not to punish you, to wake you, to return you, to show you the difference between love that expands your spirit and attachment that slowly erases it. You were not meant to disappear inside devotion. You were not meant to become smaller so someone else could feel less overwhelmed. You were not meant to call your own pain understanding forever. Your spirit broke because it could not keep carrying the cost of your silence. And now, as painful as it is, you are beginning to hear yourself again. Not perfectly, not confidently every day, but enough. Enough to notice when something drains you. Enough to feel when your body says no. Enough to recognize when your peace is being traded for proximity. Enough to understand that losing yourself is too high a price for any connection. Even one that once felt sacred. And once you see that, your frequency cannot stay the same. Something in you begins to shift. Not loudly, not visibly to everyone else, but deep inside, where the real alignment starts. Lesson of this chapter. Breaking reveals where you confused patience with self-abandonment. You were not foolish for loving deeply. You were not weak for hoping. But the moment you begin seeing where you left yourself, your energy starts returning. And once your energy returns, your frequency begins to change. Part 6. Your frequency changed before your life did. One of the strangest parts of healing is realizing the same things no longer tempt you the same way. Not all at once. Not in some dramatic moment where you wake up glowing and free. It is quieter than that. You are sitting somewhere ordinary. Maybe at your desk. Maybe in your car before going inside. Maybe lying in bed with the room half dark. And suddenly you notice something. The urge is weaker. The urge to text them. The urge to check if they watched your story. The urge to replay the same memory until it hurts again. The urge to reopen the wound just to feel close to them. It is still there, but it does not own you in the same way. And at first, that can feel confusing, almost sad, like losing the intensity means losing the connection. I remember the first time I noticed it. I had my phone in my hand. Their name was still in my contacts. The message thread was still there. And for months, opening that thread had felt like touching a live wire. My heart would speed up. My stomach would tighten. My thumb would hover over the screen like one tiny movement could pull me back into the whole emotional universe again. But that day, I opened it, and something was different. It still hurt. I will not pretend it did not. There was still tenderness there. Still memory. Still a little ache behind the ribs. But the panic was softer. The desperation was not as loud. For the first time, I was not reading the messages looking for proof that I had mattered. I was reading them and thinking, I was so tired here. That sentence changed something in me. Not instantly, but deeply. Because healing often begins when the memory stops looking only romantic and starts looking honest. You begin remembering the whole thing. Not just the warm moments. Not just the eye contact. Not just the night they said something that made your soul feel seen. You remember the waiting too. The confusion. The tight chest. The mornings after crying. The way your body would tense before asking for clarity. The way you became careful around someone you loved. And once the full memory comes back, your frequency starts shifting. You stop craving the highlight reel. You start honoring the impact. That shift is subtle. People around you may not notice it. Your life may look the same from the outside. Same room. Same job. Same routine. Same phone. Same unanswered questions. But internally, something has moved. Something inside you is no longer reaching with both hands toward what once consumed you. You start feeling a little space between you and the attachment. A small space. a sacred space. Enough to breathe. Enough to pause. Enough to ask, do I actually want this back? Or do I just want the pain to mean something? That question is not easy. It can make you angry at first. It can make you defensive. It made me defensive. I wanted my pain to mean destiny. I wanted all the nights I stayed awake to mean I was holding on for a divine reason. I wanted the intensity to be proof that I had not wasted my heart. But sometimes, the proof is not that the connection was meant to stay. Sometimes the proof is that it changed you. It woke you up. It showed you what you were willing to tolerate when your fear of loss was louder than your self-respect. And once you see that, you cannot go back to the same frequency. You might try. You might have a weak night. You might miss them so badly, you almost send the message. You might scroll through old photos. You might hear one song and feel your whole body pulled backward. That does not mean you failed. It means your nervous system is still learning a new home. Healing is not clean. It is not linear. Some days you feel powerful. Some nights you feel 15 steps behind. One morning you wake up calm. Then by evening you are remembering the way they laughed and wondering if you made the wrong choice. That is human. That is not regression. That is grief moving through the body in waves. But underneath the waves, the frequency is changing. You can feel it in what no longer feels acceptable. Mixed signals that once felt mysterious now feel exhausting. Delayed replies that once made you analyze everything now make you step back. Emotional unavailability that once felt like a challenge now feels like a warning. Not because you stopped loving deeply. You are still deep. You are still sensitive. You still feel energy before most people say a word. But your depth is no longer available for every person who knows how to activate it. That matters. There is a version of spiritual awakening that does not look like visions or angel numbers or dramatic signs. Sometimes awakening looks like disgust. A quiet disgust for what you used to call normal. You look at old patterns and think, I cannot believe I survived on so little. Not with cruelty toward yourself. With sadness. With compassion. With a strange kind of awe. You realize how long you made a meal out of crumbs. How long you treated basic consistency like a miracle. How long you called emotional uncertainty a lesson you had to prove yourself worthy of passing. And once your spirit sees that clearly, it refuses to shrink back into the same shape. That is frequency change. Not perfection. Refusal. A holy refusal. Your body begins refusing to romanticize what once damaged it. Your intuition begins refusing to be silenced by hope. Your spirit begins refusing to confuse intensity with alignment. And that refusal can feel lonely. Very lonely. Because when your frequency changes before your life changes, you exist in a strange gap. You no longer belong to the old pattern. But the new life has not fully arrived yet. You are not chasing like before. But you are not fully held by what is coming either. You are in the hallway. The spiritual hallway. The emotional in-between. And in that hallway, doubt can get loud. You may wonder, what if I am becoming cold? What if I am too guarded now? What if I will never feel that deeply again? I ask those questions too, especially after the pain started fading. There is a grief that comes with losing the obsession. People do not talk about that. When you have been emotionally attached for so long, the absence of obsession can feel like emptiness. You almost miss the ache, because at least the ache gave you something to orbit. But peace feels unfamiliar when your nervous system was trained by chaos. Peace can feel like nothing at first. Then slowly, it starts feeling like safety. You notice your shoulders drop. You sleep a little more deeply. You stop rehearsing conversations that will probably never happen. You stop explaining yourself in your head to someone who chose not to understand you when it mattered. You begin feeling your own life again. Small things return. Your appetite, your humor, your ability to sit in a room without needing noise, your interest in things that are not connected to them. You catch yourself laughing naturally, then you pause, almost surprised. There you are, still alive, still soft, still capable of feeling something other than longing. That moment is sacred, not because everything is healed, but because your energy is no longer fully trapped. The magnet is changing direction. Before, your whole emotional field pulled toward them. Their silence, their mood, their return, their possible apology, their possible awakening, their possible realization. Your energy lived in possibility. Now it begins returning to presence, to your body, to your room, to your breath, to the life happening in front of you. And this is where magnetic alignment deepens. Your soul cannot align with its true path while all its energy is negotiating with what already broke it. It cannot call in sacred union while it is still proving loyalty to emotional chaos. It cannot recognize peace while addicted to intensity. So God begins shifting the frequency inside you before anything outside changes. That is why your life may still look ordinary, but your inner world feels different. You are becoming less available to what drains you, less impressed by almost, less willing to abandon yourself for chemistry, less willing to call pain a sign. And yes, there may still be love there. There may still be memory. There may still be days where the old ache visits. But love no longer has to mean access. Memory no longer has to mean return. Pain no longer has to mean destiny. That is growth. Quiet growth. The kind nobody claps for. The kind that happens when you choose not to send the message. When you let the silence remain silent. When you stop checking for proof. When you stop reopening the same door just to confirm it is still closed. Every one of those moments changes your magnetic field. You are teaching your spirit a new direction. Not toward fear, toward alignment. Not toward survival, toward peace. Not toward the person who made your nervous system live in uncertainty. Toward the life where your body can finally rest. And maybe that is what is happening to you right now. You may not have all the answers. You may not know who is coming. You may not know when the next chapter begins. But you can feel what no longer fits. You can feel what your spirit no longer wants to carry. You can feel the difference between the connection you once begged for and the peace you are now learning to protect. That difference is not small. It is the beginning of magnetic alignment. The world may not see it yet. They may only see you being quieter, more distant, less available. But inside, your frequency is changing. And once your frequency changes, your life eventually has to follow. Lesson of this chapter: your frequency changes before your life does. At first, it may only look like less desire to chase, less tolerance for confusion, less hunger for what once consumed you. But that quiet shift matters. It means your spirit is no longer magnetized to the same wound. And once your energy stops reaching backward, your destiny finally has room to pull you forward. Part 7: people fell away because they could not match the new field. I used to feel guilty for outgrowing people. Not proud. Not powerful. Guilty. Like healing made me selfish. Like choosing peace meant I had become cold. Like becoming less available for emotional chaos somehow made me the one who changed too much. I remember noticing it slowly. A friend would text me the way they always did. Same jokes. Same complaints. Same emotional drama looping in circles. And I would stare at the screen, not knowing how to respond anymore. Not because I stopped caring. I still cared. But something in me felt tired in a place care could not fix. The old version of me would have jumped in immediately. Comforted. Explained. Carried. Absorbed. Made space for everyone's emotions except my own. But after the breaking, after the silence, after seeing how much of myself I had abandoned just to stay connected, I could not do it the same way anymore. My body would react before my mind did. A heaviness in my chest. A small tightening behind the eyes. That sinking feeling when someone reaches for your energy, but not really your heart. Do you know what I mean? When people want access to your presence, but not intimacy with your truth. They want the version of you who listens. The version who understands. The version who forgives quickly. The version who does not ask for much. But when you begin needing honesty, space, reciprocity. Suddenly the relationship changes. That can hurt more than losing a romantic connection sometimes. Because you start realizing some people were not connected to your soul. They were connected to your availability. They were connected to what you tolerated. They were connected to the version of you who made everything easier for them. And once that version begins to fade, they do not know where to stand. I remember one conversation very clearly. Someone close to me said, "You've been different lately." Their tone was soft, but underneath it, I could feel the accusation. Different meant less accessible. Different meant less reactive. Different meant I was no longer performing the emotional role they expected from me. I wanted to apologize. That was my first instinct. Isn't that strange? Someone notices you're healing, and your first reaction is to feel guilty for it. I almost said, "I am sorry. I've just been going through a lot." But something stopped me. A quiet pause. A breath. A small moment where I realized I was tired of apologizing for becoming harder to drain. So I simply said, "I know." That was all. "I know." And the silence after that sentence told me everything. Some people only know how to relate to you when you keep yourself smaller. When you are easy to access, easy to influence, easy to pull back into old dynamics. When you start becoming grounded. They call it distance. When you set boundaries. They call it attitude. When you stop over-explaining. They call it coldness. When you no longer chase their approval. They say you changed. And the painful thing is, they are not entirely wrong. You did change, but not in the way they think. You did not become heartless. You became conscious. You did not stop loving people. You stopped abandoning yourself to keep them comfortable. That difference matters. It matters deeply. There is a strange loneliness that comes after your frequency changes. It is not the same loneliness as heartbreak. Heartbreak loneliness is sharp. It has a name, a face, a memory. This loneliness is different. It is wider, quieter. It comes when you sit with people you used to feel close to, and realize your spirit is no longer fully there. You laugh at the right time. You nod. You answer normally. But inside, something feels distant. Not superior. Not judgmental. Just separate. Like your soul has quietly stepped out of a room your body is still standing in. That stage can make you question yourself. Am I isolating too much? Am I becoming too sensitive? Why does everything feel heavy now? Why can't I connect the way I used to? Raw honesty. Sometimes I miss the old version of myself. Not because she was happier. She was exhausted. But she belonged more easily. She could blend. She could tolerate surface-level conversations. She could laugh through discomfort. She could stay quiet when something hurt. She could make herself convenient. And people liked her for that. They called her kind, patient, understanding, strong. But a lot of what they called strength was survival. A lot of what they called kindness was self-erasure. A lot of what they called patience was fear of being left. When your spirit begins aligning, God starts removing your ability to betray yourself comfortably. That is one of the most unsettling parts of awakening. You can still try to go back. You can still sit in the old conversations. Answer the old calls. Enter the old rooms. Say the old things. But your body tells on you. Your nervous system no longer relaxes there. Your soul no longer expands there. You feel drained faster. Irritated faster. Sad faster. Not because you hate anyone. Because your field is changing. Your magnetic field. Your emotional field. Your spiritual field. And some people cannot meet you there. Not because they are evil. Not because they never mattered. Not because the connection was fake from the beginning. Sometimes people are real, and still not aligned with the season God is bringing you into. That is a hard truth to hold, especially for chosen ones, because chosen ones often want to bring everyone with them. You remember who was there during certain chapters. You remember the conversations, the late nights, the shared pain, the history. And history can feel like obligation. You think, they were there before. They know parts of me no one else knows. I can't just outgrow them. But growth does not always ask for permission from history. Sometimes your soul moves before your relationships understand. Sometimes your healing creates distance without hatred. Sometimes your peace requires exits you never planned to take. I used to think losing people meant I had failed at loving them. Now I see it differently. Some connections were only able to survive while I kept playing the role they needed. The rescuer, the listener, the emotional sponge, the one who came back, the one who understood, the one who would rather be hurt than be misunderstood. But once I began choosing myself, some bonds lost their structure. Not dramatically. No big ending. No final confrontation. Just fewer messages. Shorter conversations. Less emotional pull. A quiet drifting. And the silence that followed felt familiar. Almost like the romantic separation all over again. But this time, it was not one person. It was a whole field. A whole identity. A whole version of life losing access. That can feel frightening. When multiple people fall away at once, you start wondering if God is stripping your life down too far. You ask, why is everything leaving? Why does my life feel smaller? Why am I being isolated again? But look closer. Is your life getting smaller? Or is your access becoming more sacred? Is everyone leaving? Or are the people who relied on your wounded availability losing their old doorway into you? That question changes the feeling. Not immediately, but slowly. You begin noticing who remains when you stop performing, who respects the quieter version of you, who does not punish you for having boundaries, who can sit with your truth without needing you to become easier, who loves you without requiring access to your exhaustion. Those people feel different, calmer, less invasive, more spacious. They do not pull on your spirit the same way. They do not make you feel guilty for needing rest. They do not treat your healing like a personal rejection. And that is when you realize, alignment is not only about who leaves. It is also about who can stay without needing you to shrink. Your magnetic field is becoming more honest. It no longer responds to every familiar pull. It no longer opens for every emotional demand. It no longer mistakes intensity for intimacy. And as that field changes, people reveal themselves. Some move closer with respect. Some drift away in confusion. Some try to pull you back into who you were. Some resent the peace they no longer have access to. Let them reveal. That is part of the process. Not everyone who questions your growth deserves an explanation. Not every fading connection needs a dramatic ending. Sometimes the most sacred thing you can do is stop chasing people who are only comfortable with the version of you that was easier to wound. I know that sounds harsh. It is not meant to be. It is meant to be honest. There is grief in this stage. Real grief. You may miss people who were not good for your nervous system. You may miss rooms that no longer feel like home. You may miss being understood by people who only understood the old pain. You may even feel tempted to become small again, just to feel familiar connection. That temptation is real. Some nights you will wonder if healing is worth the loneliness. Some days you will think, maybe I should just be how I used to be. Less direct, less sensitive, less boundaried, less awake. But you cannot unknow what your spirit has shown you. You cannot comfortably return to the version of yourself that survived by disappearing. You can visit that old energy for a moment, but you cannot live there anymore. Not without feeling the cost. That is how you know magnetic alignment is working. Your soul starts rejecting what your wound used to accept. Your body starts resisting what your fear used to tolerate. Your spirit starts closing doors your loneliness would have kept open. And yes, it may feel like loss, but it is also protection. A quieter kind of protection. The kind that does not always announce itself. The kind that looks like unanswered calls. Faded friendships. Awkward conversations. Invitations you no longer want to accept. Places you no longer feel drawn to. People who suddenly cannot understand you. It looks like distance, but often, it is God clearing the field, making room, not only for your twin flame destiny, but for the version of you who can actually stand inside sacred love without losing yourself again. Because sacred union does not only require the right person, it requires the right field, the right emotional environment, the right level of self-respect, the right energetic boundaries. A soul cannot enter magnetic alignment while surrounded by people who constantly pull it back into survival. So some people had to fall away. Some dynamics had to expire. Some familiar energies had to lose access. Not because you are better than them, because you are becoming responsible for your own spirit. That responsibility changes everything. It changes who you answer, who you explain yourself to, who you let close, who gets your softness, who receives your silence, who deserves your emotional labor. And maybe this is where you are right now, in that uncomfortable middle, not fully surrounded by the new people yet, not fully free from missing the old ones, standing somewhere between grief and relief, feeling guilty one moment, peaceful the next, missing someone, then remembering why your body feels calmer without them. That contradiction does not mean you are confused. It means you are human. The heart remembers. The spirit discerns. Both speak at once for a while, but eventually peace becomes louder. Not loud like excitement, loud like safety, loud like breathing without bracing, loud like walking into your own life and not feeling pulled apart by everyone else's needs. That is the beginning of a new field, a cleaner field, a magnetic field that no longer forms around abandonment wounds, but around truth. And once that field begins to stabilize, something strange starts happening. You feel a pull, not toward the past, not toward the people fading away, toward something ahead, something you cannot fully see yet. A different life, a different version of love, a different version of you. And that pull is where the next chapter begins. Lesson of this chapter: not everyone leaves because they hate you. Some people fall away because they cannot access the version of you God is raising now. Your healing may feel like distance to those who benefited from your self-abandonment. But when your field changes, the wrong dynamics lose their grip. And after the removals, your soul begins feeling pulled toward a life it has not entered yet. Part 8: the magnetic pull toward a different life began quietly. There were days I felt ridiculous for believing something was shifting. Nothing looked different. The same room, the same routine, the same unanswered questions sitting somewhere in the background of my chest. I would wake up, make coffee, check my phone, move through the day like a normal person. But inside, something felt strangely ahead of me, like my body was still living in one life, while my soul had already started walking toward another. And I could not explain it to anyone. That was the frustrating part. How do you tell someone? I feel like something is coming, when nothing has happened yet. How do you explain that your spirit feels restless in familiar places? How do you explain that old conversations suddenly feel too small? Old habits feel heavy. Old dreams feel like clothing that no longer fits. People want proof. They want events, names, dates, clear signs. But magnetic alignment rarely begins with visible proof. It begins as a pull, a quiet inner pull, a strange sense that something beyond your current life is already calling you. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough to make the old life feel uncomfortable. I remember standing in a grocery store once, holding a basket with almost nothing in it. Bananas, water, something I probably bought because I could not think clearly. And suddenly this song started playing overhead. It was a song connected to them. Not in an obvious way. Not our song. Just one of those songs that had somehow absorbed the emotional texture of the connection. And for a second, my whole body stopped. Not because I wanted to go back. That was the strange part. I did not feel the same desperate ache. I felt recognition. Like the song was not pulling me toward the past anymore. It was reminding me that something in me had survived it. I stood there between two aisles, pretending to read the label on a bottle of sparkling water. while my chest got tight for reasons nobody around me could see. That is how alignment often speaks. Through ordinary moments that suddenly feel charged. A song, a number, a dream, a name you keep hearing, a place you feel drawn to for no clear reason, a sudden wave of emotion while washing dishes, a strange calm after weeks of chaos, a feeling that your life is being rearranged behind the scenes, even though externally, nothing has announced itself yet. And yes, sometimes you question it. You wonder if you are just trying to make meaning out of pain. You wonder if your mind is creating signs so the heartbreak feels less wasted. You wonder if hope is making you foolish again. I know that fear. The fear of believing. After you have been disappointed enough times, hope starts to feel dangerous. You do not want to be the person who sees signs everywhere. You do not want to build another fantasy. You do not want to call every coincidence divine. So you become careful. You tell yourself to stay grounded, to be realistic, to stop looking for meaning. But the pull does not disappear. It stays. Soft. Persistent. Like a hand on your back. Not pushing. Guiding. And the deeper your healing becomes, the clearer that pull feels. Not toward the person who broke you. Not toward the old cycle. Not toward the version of love that made your nervous system live in survival. This pull feels different. Cleaner. Quieter. Less addictive. It does not make you want to chase. It makes you want to prepare. That difference matters. A wounded pull makes you obsess. A sacred pull makes you become. A wounded pull makes you check your phone. A sacred pull makes you check your heart. A wounded pull asks, do they miss me? A sacred pull asks, am I becoming someone who can receive peace without distrusting it? That question is uncomfortable. It brings everything inward again. And maybe that is why this stage feels so strange. The pull is not only toward another person. It is toward another life. A life where you do not have to shrink to be loved. A life where your body is not constantly bracing for emotional abandonment. A life where you no longer confuse intensity with intimacy. A life where sacred connection does not require you to betray your own nervous system. And when that kind of life starts calling you, your current life begins feeling tight. Not necessarily bad. Just too small. You may notice yourself craving different spaces. More quiet. More nature. More privacy. Less noise. Less drama. Less performance. You may start feeling drawn to clean your room. Change your routines. Delete old photos. Rearrange furniture. Take a different route home. Wear different colors. Listen to different music. Small things. Human things. But they are not random. Sometimes the soul prepares for a new field through ordinary acts of clearing. It starts making room before you know what you are making room for. I remember one night cleaning out old drawers after midnight. I was not planning to. I just suddenly could not stand the clutter. Receipts. Old notes. Things connected to a version of me who was always waiting. I found something they had given me once. Nothing expensive. Nothing dramatic. Just a small object with too much memory inside it. And I held it for a long time. Not crying. Just remembering. Then I put it in a box. Not out of hatred. Not out of bitterness. More like respect. Respect for what it had meant. And respect for the fact that it could no longer sit in the center of my life. That moment felt small. But spiritually, it was not small. It was a signal. My energy was no longer organizing itself around the wound. It was beginning to organize itself around freedom. That is magnetic alignment. Not a lightning strike. Not always an angelic vision. Sometimes it is putting one object away. Sometimes it is not answering a message that reopens the same ache. Sometimes it is feeling a memory and not letting it decide your future. Sometimes it is noticing that your heart still cares, but your spirit no longer wants to suffer for proof. And during this stage, synchronicities often increase. 1111, 222, 333, a repeated name, a dream that feels too vivid, a phrase that follows you across different places. You may hear the same message from 3 unrelated people. You may think of something and then see it reflected back to you in a random conversation. You may feel like life is quietly speaking in symbols. And again, your mind may doubt it. That is okay. Discernment matters. Not every sign is a command. Not every coincidence is a prophecy. But when your inner world is changing, your awareness changes with it. You begin noticing resonance, patterns, timing, energy. You become more sensitive to what feels aligned and what feels forced. That sensitivity is not craziness. It is your field becoming more honest. Your spirit is no longer asleep inside survival. It is listening, and the pull toward a different life becomes stronger. Not necessarily easier. Stronger. You may still miss the past. You may still have days where grief visits. You may still wonder why certain things had to break the way they did. But now there is another feeling underneath the grief. A feeling almost like anticipation. Quiet anticipation. Not frantic. Not desperate. Just a small inner knowing that your life is not finished becoming. That what left did not take the whole future with it. That what broke did not destroy the path. It cleared it. I think that is one of the most tender moments in healing. When hope returns, but softer. Not the old hope that begged someone to change. Not the old hope that waited outside closed doors. A different hope. A grounded hope. A hope that says, I do not know what is coming, but I know I cannot go back to what was killing my spirit. That is when the magnetic pull becomes sacred. It stops being about getting someone back. It becomes about being drawn into alignment with the life God was trying to prepare you for all along. And this is where twin flame destiny begins to feel different too. Less like obsession, more like recognition. Less like chasing a person, more like being moved toward a frequency where the right soul can actually meet you. You begin understanding that sacred union is not simply about 2 people finding each other. It is about becoming able to stand in a field where love does not make you disappear, where connection does not cost you your peace, where desire does not override discernment, where your heart can open without handing your power away. That kind of love requires a different life, a different nervous system, a different relationship with yourself. So the pull begins before the arrival. The field forms before the person steps into it. Your soul starts preparing the room internally before the outer door opens. And maybe that is what you have been feeling lately. A restlessness you cannot explain. A strange emotional distance from the past. A desire to clear things. A sensitivity to signs. A quiet knowing that something ahead is connected to the person you are becoming. Not the person you had to be to survive. That feeling is not small. It is not random. It is the beginning of movement. The old field is losing its hold. The new field is starting to call. And even if you cannot see the whole path yet, your spirit can feel the direction. That is enough for now. Not everything sacred arrives with proof first. Sometimes it arrives as a pull, a whisper, a repeated sign, a sudden calm, a moment in a grocery store where a song plays. And instead of breaking you, it shows you how far you have come. Lesson of this chapter. Magnetic alignment often begins as a quiet inner pull before life gives you proof. You may feel drawn toward a different life before you understand where it is leading. That does not mean you are imagining everything. It may mean your spirit has already started moving toward the field your future requires. And once the pull becomes stronger than the wound, the false magnet begins to break. Part 9. The false pull had to break before the true one could find you. I wanted sacred love, but part of me was still addicted to being wanted by the wrong person. That is not an easy sentence to say. Even now, it has a little shame in it. Not the loud kind. The quiet kind that sits behind the ribs and whispers, "You should have known better." But I did not know better. Not then. Back then, I thought the strongest pull was always the most meaningful one. If I could not stop thinking about them, it had to be spiritual. If my body reacted when their name appeared, it had to be destiny. If the connection made me ache in places I did not know could ache, It had to mean something sacred was happening. And maybe it was sacred in one way. But not in the way I wanted. It was sacred because it exposed me. It showed me the part of myself that still believed love had to hurt a little to feel real. It showed me the part of my nervous system that confused uncertainty with chemistry. It showed me the part of my heart that was still trying to be chosen by someone who kept making me feel alone. That kind of honesty is not pretty. It does not arrive with soft music and golden light. It arrives when you are tired. When the same cycle has repeated so many times that even your hope starts sounding exhausted. When you look at your phone and realize you are not waiting for love anymore. You are waiting for relief. That realization can break something open. Because there is a difference between longing for someone and needing them to regulate the ache they created. A false pull feels urgent. It feels like you must do something. Text them. Check on them. Look for signs. Decode their silence. Read meaning into every small movement. It keeps your body alert. Your chest tight. Your thoughts busy. Your energy orbiting them. A true pull feels different. It may still be deep. It may still be powerful. It may still touch places inside you that words cannot reach. But it does not make you disappear from yourself. It does not require constant panic to prove importance. It does not leave your nervous system begging for safety and calling that begging love. That difference took me a long time to understand. I used to think peace meant something was missing. If there was no ache, no anxiety, no emotion el chase, no dramatic high after a painful low, then maybe the connection was not deep enough. That is what unstable love teaches you. It trains your body to associate intensity with meaning. You become used to the rush. The silence hurts. Then the message comes. Your whole body relaxes. You feel chosen again. For a few hours. Maybe a day. Everything feels possible. Then the energy shifts. They pull back. The warmth fades. And your body falls again. After enough cycles, the relief starts feeling like love. But relief is not the same as love. Relief is what the body feels when the threat temporarily stops. Love should not feel like surviving between threats. Read that slowly. Love should not feel like surviving between threats. I remember realizing this one afternoon in the most ordinary way. I was sitting in my car outside a store. The engine was off. My hands were resting on the steering wheel. I had just received a message from them after days of silence. And for a second, my whole body flooded with warmth. Not joy exactly. More like oxygen. Like I had been underwater and finally came up. I stared at the message. It was not even that meaningful. Nothing deeply loving. Nothing clear. Just enough. Enough to pull me back. Enough to make me forget the nights I had cried. Enough to make me question the decision I had almost made to let go. And I remember thinking, this is not peace. It was such a small thought. Almost quiet enough to miss. But it landed. This is not peace. My body was not opening. It was recovering. There is a difference. And once you notice that difference, you cannot fully unnotice it. You begin seeing the cycle from outside of it. Not perfectly. You may still fall back in. You may still miss them. You may still have weak moments where one message pulls your heart into the past. But something in you starts watching, observing, feeling the pattern instead of becoming completely swallowed by it. That is when the false pull begins to break. Not when you stop caring. When you stop confusing caring with surrendering your center. The false pull had to break because it was taking up the space where true magnetic alignment needed to form. Your soul cannot be fully available for peace while it is still addicted to emotional interruption. Your heart cannot recognize steady love while chaos still feels more convincing. Your spirit cannot move toward sacred union while part of you is still waiting for someone inconsistent to finally prove your worth. That is painful to admit, especially when the person meant something to you. Especially when there were real moments. Real tenderness. Real eye contact. Real spiritual charge. Real memories that still live inside your body. This is where people get confused. They think releasing the false pull means denying the connection ever mattered. It does not. Some connections matter deeply, and still cannot carry your destiny. Some people awaken your soul, and still cannot walk with the version of you that awakening creates. Some bonds are real, but still not safe. That is the contradiction. The human heart hates contradiction. It wants clean answers. It wants either or. Either they were your destiny, or the whole thing was meaningless. Either they loved you, or none of it was real. Either you were foolish, or you were divinely guided. But emotional truth is often more layered than that. They may have loved you in the only way they knew how, and it still may not have been enough. The connection may have been spiritually significant, and it still may have been unable to become sacred union. You may have felt something real, and still needed to walk away from the version of yourself that kept suffering for it. Those statements can all live in the same room. They do not cancel each other. They mature you. There was a time when I would have rejected that completely. I wanted love to be simple. I wanted the person who awakened me to be the person who stayed. I wanted the intensity to become safety. I wanted the almost to become a rival. But sometimes God uses a connection to wake the soul, then removes it before it becomes a prison. Not because your heart was wrong, because your heart was still learning how to tell the difference between activation and alignment. Activation shakes you. Alignment steadies you. Activation exposes the wound. Alignment meets the healed space. Activation makes you ask, why do I feel this so strongly? Alignment makes you breathe and realize, I do not have to abandon myself here. The false pull had to break so your body could stop worshiping the shake, so your nervous system could stop mistaking the crash for passion, so your spirit could finally recognize the quiet, the calm, the consistency, the kind of love that does not need to keep triggering your abandonment wound to feel profound. Would you have recognized peace before pain taught you the cost of chaos? Be honest. Would you have trusted steady love if unstable love still felt exciting? Would you have chosen someone emotionally present if part of you still believed unavailable love was more spiritual because it was harder to win? Those questions are uncomfortable. They were for me too. I used to think I wanted peace, but when peace first appeared in small ways, I did not know what to do with it. I questioned it. I looked for the missing intensity. I wondered if calm meant lack of chemistry. No. Calm meant my body was not in threat response. Calm meant I was not being asked to perform for emotional scraps. Calm meant my spirit could stay inside itself. And that is what true magnetic alignment begins to feel like. Not flat, not empty, not boring. Safe enough for your soul to come forward. Safe enough for your heart to open without bracing. Safe enough for your body to stop scanning for the next withdrawal. But you cannot receive that kind of field while you are still loyal to the false one. So the breaking had to happen. The disappointment had to become undeniable. The cycle had to exhaust itself. The fantasy had to lose enough oxygen that your spirit could finally breathe. And yes, there may still be grief. There may be days when your body misses the old pull. That is normal. The nervous system grieves what it practiced. You might miss the rush, the obsession, the hope, the emotional drama that made life feel intense even when it was hurting you. You might miss having someone to focus on, someone to imagine, someone to wait for, someone to make the pain feel organized around a name. When that begins fading, life can feel strangely empty. Not peaceful yet, just empty. Like the stage has gone dark after a long, exhausting performance. But stay there. Do not rush to fill it. That emptiness is not failure. It is the space where the true field begins. A field not built around proving yourself. Not built around being chosen halfway. Not built around chasing someone else's awakening. A field built around your return to yourself. And once that field strengthens, your attraction changes. You stop being impressed by mixed signals. You stop romanticizing emotional distance. You stop confusing someone's potential with their presence. You stop calling the ache proof. You start asking quieter questions. Do I feel safe here? Can I be honest here? Is there consistency? Does this connection expand me? Or does it make me monitor myself? Those questions are not as dramatic as longing, but they are more sacred. They protect the version of you God has been rebuilding. They protect the magnetic alignment that is forming through your healing. They protect your future from being hijacked by familiar pain. I know part of you may still want the old person to be the one. That is human. There is no shame in that. When someone touched your soul, you do not simply erase them. You learn what their presence revealed. You learn what their absence taught. You learn where the connection awakened you, and where it almost made you abandon yourself. Then you carry the lesson forward without carrying the chain. That is the difference. You can honor what happened without staying magnetized to it. You can admit it mattered without letting it define your future. You can love someone at a distance and still choose the field where your spirit can finally rest. That choice changes everything. Not immediately. Not perfectly. But energetically. The moment your soul stops reaching backward for the person who kept triggering survival, your future begins having access to you. The true pull can finally be felt. Not the desperate pull. Not the obsessive pull. Not the one that makes you lose sleep and call it destiny. The true pull. The quiet one. The one that draws you toward peace. Toward wholeness. Toward a love that does not require emotional starvation to feel meaningful. And maybe this is the part of your journey right now. The false pull is weakening. You still feel echoes. You still remember. You still have moments. But something in you knows. You cannot keep calling suffering sacred. You cannot keep calling anxiety chemistry. You cannot keep waiting for someone else's inconsistency to become your confirmation. Your spirit broke first, so the false magnet could finally lose its power. And once it loses power, the real alignment begins to call louder. Softly, steadily, almost like God whispering through the space they used to occupy. There is something different now. Do not go back to what taught you pain. Stay open for what teaches you peace. And that is where the final message begins. Lesson of this chapter. The false pull had to break, so your soul could recognize what does not require suffering to feel sacred. Karmic intensity can feel magnetic, but true alignment feels safe enough for your spirit to stay present. Once your body stops confusing anxiety with love, your destiny can finally begin pulling you forward. Part 10. You did not break a part, you broke open. If you are still here, some part of you already knows this was never just pain. Not ordinary pain. Not the kind that simply comes, hurts, and leaves. This was the kind of pain that rearranged you. The kind that made you stare at your own life and wonder how much of it was truly yours. And how much of it was built around being chosen. Being needed. Being understood by someone who still could not meet you fully. I remember thinking, near the end of my own breaking, I don't recognize myself anymore. Not in a dramatic way. More like a quiet confession. I was brushing my teeth one night, looking at my own face in the mirror, and there was this tiredness in my eyes that made me pause. I looked older somehow. Not physically. Spiritually. Like my soul had lived through a whole lifetime inside one connection. And I remember whispering, I just want to feel like myself again. That sentence stayed with me. Because at the time, I thought healing meant getting over them. But later, I realized healing meant returning to the parts of myself I had abandoned while trying to keep them. The laughter, the peace, the honesty, the softness that did not have to beg for safety. The version of me who could sit in a room without measuring someone else's emotional temperature. The version who did not confuse silence with punishment. The version who did not make a home out of waiting. Maybe you know that ache too. Not just missing the person, but missing yourself. Missing the person you were before the anxiety. Before the mixed signals. Before your nervous system learned to treat every delayed reply like danger. Before you started shrinking your needs to keep a connection alive. And if you are honest, the breaking did not begin on the final day. It began long before that. In all the moments you swallowed your truth. In every it's okay, that was not okay. In every night you stared at the ceiling trying to convince yourself not to feel what you felt. In every moment you sensed the energy shifting, but chose the fantasy over your own body's warning. The final collapse was only the moment your spirit stopped cooperating. That is what breaking really was. A refusal. A sacred refusal. Your soul finally saying, "I cannot keep surviving what I was created to outgrow." And yes, it hurt. It hurt in ways that made you question everything. Your intuition, your worth, your faith, your ability to love again. There were moments when you wondered if you would ever feel normal. Moments when the silence felt too wide. Moments when your body missed the chaos simply because chaos had become familiar. That part is hard to admit. Sometimes peace does not feel peaceful at first. Sometimes peace feels empty. Sometimes peace feels like losing the emotional drama that once gave your heart something to orbit. You may have missed the obsession, the anticipation, the little rush when they came back, the temporary relief after days of uncertainty. And then you judged yourself for missing it. But please hear this gently. Your body was learning. Your nervous system was detoxing. Your spirit was trying to understand how to feel safe without needing someone else's inconsistency to resolve. That is not weakness. That is withdrawal from survival love. And survival love can feel powerful. It can feel spiritual. It can feel magnetic, especially when it touches your wound with just enough tenderness to keep you hoping. But true magnetic alignment is different. It does not keep you trapped in emotional hunger. It does not require you to keep proving your worth to someone who keeps disappearing. It does not ask you to abandon your peace just to preserve the idea of destiny. True alignment begins when the false magnet loses its power, when the connection that once consumed you starts becoming clear. When you stop asking, "Why didn't they choose me?" and begin asking, "Why did I keep choosing pain when my spirit was begging for peace?" That question is not meant to shame you. It is meant to wake you, because your breaking was not the end of your spiritual path. It was the moment God finally got your attention in the place where you kept negotiating with pain. Not through punishment, through exposure, through silence, through the painful truth your heart kept avoiding. God was not trying to ruin your life. He was removing the emotional structures that could not carry your destiny. The attachment, the fear, the self-abandonment, the fantasy, the version of love that made you feel chosen only when someone unstable decided to come close again. All of it had to lose its hold. Not because you were wrong for loving deeply. Your depth was never the problem. Your loyalty was never the problem. Your softness was never the problem. The wound was where you kept giving those sacred parts of yourself to situations that could not protect them. That is what had to change. Your spirit had to break first, so it could stop handing holy things to unsafe places. And now, even if you are still healing, even if some nights still feel tender, even if one song can still take you backward for a moment, something in you is different. You know it. You may not have the words yet, but you feel it. You do not chase the same way. You do not trust confusion the same way. You do not romanticize anxiety the same way. You are becoming harder to manipulate with almost love, almost consistency, almost effort, almost honesty, almost choosing you. Once, almost was enough to keep you waiting. Now it feels different, heavier, too expensive. And that shift is not bitterness. It is alignment. It is your soul finally recognizing that sacred love should not require you to bleed quietly just to keep believing. There is a version of you rising now. And I know that sounds poetic, but I mean it in the most human way. The version who pauses before replying. The version who listens to the body. The version who does not explain the same boundary 5 times. The version who can miss someone and still not reopen the wound. The version who can love deeply without handing over the keys to their entire nervous system. That version was not born in comfort. They were born in the break. In the silence. In the nights you thought you were losing everything. In the mornings you still got up with swollen eyes and kept breathing anyway. In the tiny decisions nobody saw. Not checking. Not begging. Not sending the paragraph. Not apologizing for needing consistency. Not returning to a door just because loneliness knocked. Those moments mattered. More than you know. They were not small. They were the rebuilding of your magnetic field. Every time you chose peace over panic, your field changed. Every time you stopped calling chaos chemistry, your field changed. Every time you let silence remain silence instead of chasing it for answers, your field changed. And slowly, the life meant for the aligned version of you started having access. Not all at once, not loudly, but in the background, in your standards, in your intuition, in the way your body relaxes around truth now, in the way you can feel when something is off without needing to argue with yourself for weeks, in the way you crave emotional safety more than emotional intensity. That is not you becoming cold. That is you becoming safe for yourself, and the person meant for your soul. The mirror who can recognize the version of you that no longer survives through self-abandonment cannot meet you in the field of your old pain. They meet you in the field you are building now. The cleaner field. The honest field. The field where your spirit is no longer bargaining with what broke it. So if everything in your life has felt like subtraction lately, people leaving, desires changing, old habits losing their pull, places feeling unfamiliar, your heart not reacting the same way it used to, please do not assume you are falling behind. You may be aligning. You may be clearing space. You may be standing in the quiet after the false pull finally broke. And yes, that can feel lonely. It can feel like nothing is happening. It can feel like God has taken more than He has given. But sometimes the empty space is not emptiness. Sometimes it is the first room your soul has had to breathe in years. And maybe that is where you are now. Breathing again. Not perfectly. Not without tears. But differently. More honestly. More awake. More aware of what your peace costs. And less willing to spend it on people who only love you when you are easy to wound. That is growth. Sacred growth. Messy growth. Human growth. The kind that does not always look beautiful while it is happening, but changes everything afterward. So no, you did not break apart. You broke open. Open enough to see the pattern. Open enough to feel the truth. Open enough to stop calling survival love destiny. Open enough for God to begin magnetic alignment in the places where attachment used to live. And now the final question is not, will they come back? It is deeper than that. Quieter. More powerful. Will I stay with myself this time? Because that is where the next life begins. Not in the return of someone who once made you lose yourself, but in your decision to never abandon your spirit again for a connection that cannot meet you fully. That decision, even if whispered through tears, is the beginning of a different destiny, a different field, a different kind of love, and the version of you rising now may finally be the one your mirror soul can recognize. Lesson of this chapter: your breaking was not the end of your path. It was the moment your soul stopped surviving the wrong life and started becoming available for the right one. You were not ruined. You were opened. And once your spirit stops negotiating with pain, your magnetic alignment can finally begin. If this message reached the part of you that has been quietly trying to heal, comment, "My spirit broke open for alignment." Or write, "I accept my magnetic alignment." And if you stayed until the end, take that as a sign. Something in you is not waiting anymore. Something in you is returning. And that return is where destiny begins.